Hello and welcome to the Calmcast, a time to feel calm and think clearly. I'm Claire Downham, the Queen of Calm, a transformational life coach. I was a burnt out head teacher who finally made the journey to calm after years of trying, and I want to prevent you from having to do the same. The Calmcast is a series of short explorations, gently guiding you back to your natural state, which is calm and clarity. Just listen like you would listen to music, with an open mind and curiosity. There's nothing else to do. Now let's relax into today's episode. So today is my last session on finding on relationships, and today we're exploring balance. And I definitely remember my life being very out of balance. Well, of course it was. I burnt out, didn't I? So there has to have been a lot that was out of balance for me to get to the point where I burnt out. But for me, that the person here, perhaps we could be exploring, making sure that we spend enough time with our families as opposed to working or running our businesses. Whereas for me, the person who fell to the bottom of the pile was me. Everything else got done. I didn't let anybody down. I spent time with my kids. I did my job well. I did my social life excessively, to say the least. But I still, it was me that was lost in the middle of all of that. It was me who wasn't cared for or wasn't in balance, because I think this is probably why lots of women do burn out, is because we come from this place of needing to please everybody and do everything and make sure everybody is okay. That I don't think there's anything kind of wrong with that, in that, we can then really see that women are truly nurturing and come from this place of nurturing. But perhaps that's not so good when, rather than us having all these options and being able to do anything, we're caught in this trap of doing everything or trying to do everything. And for me, it was work, it was children. At the point at which I burnt out, I'd recently become a single parent. It was all of that. I mean, I've been at that for years anyway. It wasn't just the marriage breakup that had me caught up in this web of needing to do everything. It started way before that, but of course it was compounded once I was on my own, and I thought I had to do, and listen to that, I thought I had to do everything. I had to make it right with the kids, right with my job, and right with my ridiculous social life, which was where I was seeking my well-being for a really long time. So the whole thing was completely out of balance. But to me, these days, I see balance like it's often spoken about in terms of, you need to have boundaries. So you must leave work at this time, and you must do it this way, and it's got to be very structured, and you must have boundaries, and all that kind of thing. But to me, it's much more present than that. And even years ago, I when I reflect on as my children grew up and I was working full time, I can see how I actually had a grip of that even back then. I mean, it went a bit strange after I split from my husband, and I tried to shove a great big ridiculous amount of social life into it all. But before that, I kind of, it had an organic feel to it, because so my children, when I had my children, both times when I had my children, I went back to work after a maternity leave of about 7 months, to full-time work. I never wanted to go part-time. I was very career driven, and in my head, I had the whole, as a teacher, so I had the whole 6-week holiday, and all the other holidays, 13 weeks a year to spend with my children. And I did do that. That was the cut-off for me. That was an area where I said, right, 6 weeks holiday, the holidays, school's holidays, I'm with my children. And while they're awake, I will try to be with them, even if that meant we cooked food together. So when they were very small, I would, my ex-husband would take them to childcare in the morning. So I would get out the door quite early, say good morning to them, but then I would be out the door and leave him to do the morning. So they were still with a parent. They never went, they very rarely, only if he was travelling for something, they would go to morning childcare. They didn't go to morning childcare, they were dropped off. Well, when they were very small, they went to morning childcare, obviously, but when they got older and they were going to school, they were dropped off at school by him. And then I would go to work very early. I was an early morning person. I still like early mornings now, perhaps a little bit too much to be fair. So I would go early and I would come home early. So obviously sometimes I had meetings and sometimes I had to stay late, but I would generally be out of school by 4 o'clock to pick up my children and make our evening meal. And we would do that together. That was one of the things because I think, if you're creating balance with your relationship with your children, you don't have to be playing with them. You can be doing life skills with them. So for me, that was, well, we're putting the washing on together and we're doing the cooking together and it was all very organic. And so when they were very young and went to bed at 7 or 7:30, after they went to bed, I would then start work again. And that was how I kind of kept my relationship with my children going. I would say the relationship that didn't survive that very well was the relationship with my husband, because I didn't really have much time for him in and amongst all that, balancing that out. But as they got older, that kind of changed, as they got older and they had kind of more after school clubs and things like that, I would, I'd maybe pick them up. I'd take them, perhaps pick them up, take them to an after school club. Then I would work while they're in the after school club. And then the evening would go out a bit longer because they would be going to bed later. And then, so I just, over the years, I kind of it had to change. And I think what I'm saying to you here is that even now, I don't have a rigid routine. And I know that's the opposite of what we're being told, that if you want to have balance in your life and balance in your relationships, you must have a rigidity to that, and you must have some routines and habits. And I see that completely the opposite way. So here's a few examples from me. I sometimes have a nap during the week in the afternoon on a working day, in inverted commas. But sometimes I wake up on a Sunday morning early because I'm generally quite an early riser. Bruce is still asleep, and I'll do a little bit of work. So I've done, I might plan out these sessions, or I'll, be inspired to write something, or whatever it is. I'll just do a bit. But then I listen to my body, and I kind of stop when my body says stop. I try to stop. I can't always, because if I've got clients, I tend not to cancel them. But I will cancel other things. I'll cancel one-to-ones. I'll cancel networking. I listen to my body moment by moment. And also, Bruce and I, we don't really have a big strict thing about when we're together and when we're not. We tend to have no phones at the table, if possible. Although if we have a row about something we can solve on Google, we'll do that. But we tend to kind of have quite a fluid relationship with that. So it's, so sometimes he's got a lot of work on and he'll wake up and I'm on my laptop and he'll say, oh, should we just sit here for an hour and do a little bit of work? And we'll sit together on the bed and we'll do a bit of work. Well, that's going against all the rules, isn't it, about how he should be? And, and then we'll get up and do something together. But it's just being so present with just what is now. And also, I think in this balance game that we're trying to play is the rules. There are apparently so many rules about it. It's got to look like this, or it's got to look like that. And this is the right way to do it, and this is the wrong way. Well, the right way is what's right for you. And no matter that, whether that's in seeking balance or anything else, it's right. This weekend I had a lady who had a quick discovery call with me, and I thought she was really keen. She seemed to want to work with me, and I was really excited because she's just was a perfect kind of client for me. I was like, oh, I'm absolutely going to love working with this lady. And she messaged me like a couple of days later to say she changed her mind and she decided to do something completely different. And I trust. It's nothing to do with me. It's her wisdom guiding her. That's not my job so that's what I said when she emailed me to say I don't want to go ahead at the moment. I emailed and said, well, well done for trusting your wisdom and going with what you think's right. And, I just hope that whoever she's working with continues to guide her to do that, because we don't need anybody else telling us what to do. We don't need somebody else's balanced routine or somebody else's way of doing these things. We just don't. We don't need that. And yet we seem to think we do. And so for me, finding balance is becoming less and less complicated because it's in the moment. Like in the moment now, I'm stood at my desk today in the motorhome with the noisy cars going past. And I just noticed that I was stood with my legs crossed a bit, and I just moved my feet because it was hurting. Like, to me, that's balance. It's like it's like balancing some scales. You can't do that in advance. If you're say, those old-fashioned scales, like the brass ones, where you put the weights on one side and you put the ingredient, let's take flour, on the other side, that you can't, you put the weights on, and then bit by bit, you add a bit more flour and a bit more flour and a bit more flour until you make the thing balance. Now, if I sneeze and I blow a bit of flour off, I'm going to have to put a little bit more on in this moment. And I'm going to use that flour to make, I don't know, a cake or whatever. And then I'm going to weigh out the next ingredient using different way. It's moment by moment. I'm creating that balance on that scale. But that's a moment by moment thing. It's a little few more grains of flour, or it's taking a few grains of flour off to make that scale balance. It's not a big job to do. It's just in the moment. And it's really, about being present. Because, if your relationships are getting out of balance, i.e. you're spending too much time at work and not enough time perhaps with your family, you will start to be aware of that. Definitely not in a self-critical way or a judgmental way, but just, oh yeah, actually, there's a bit of disconnect here. I noticed it. Bruce and I got into a habit of watching television while we were eating. Not a good habit. Anyway, whatever. And I noticed that, and I said, shall we just eat at the table, and then we can go and chill and watch a bit of telly. We like to watch a bit of telly. It's our little thing at the end of the day. Again, we don't measure that. We watch a bit of telly, and then sometimes we don't watch a bit of telly. Sometimes we like to play cards. Play cards quite a lot in the motorhome, not so much at home. And last night we went for a walk because while I'm recording this, I happen to be parked. Literally, the sea is about 30 meters just to my right. So we're just working it out as we go along. And if I look at an average week, there is no average week. Sometimes we spend more time together, sometimes less. If it feels like it's out of balance, then one of us will say, oh, should we do something different, or should we? It doesn't need all these boundaries and rules and strictness. Navigate from the present moment with all things, because that is where your wisdom is going to guide you best. So balance is such an amazing subject. I do talk about balance in a couple of my courses. I definitely talk about it in the one about productivity, and I'm fairly sure I'll talk about it in the 3 principles sustainable calm course as well. So if it's something you want to see a little bit more about, you'll probably hear a little bit more there. So lots of love. Thank you. Take care. Thank you so much for listening. There's nothing to do now but bring some awareness to how this is working out in your life. Listen regularly to experience longer and longer periods of calm. This has been the Calmcast with Claire Downham, Queen of Calm. Take care and keep listening.